I love you. I love you so much. You're so beautiful. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You're so beautiful. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes.
It started back in 94 on the east coast of the States. Ultraviolet Philadelphia, Gorilla had their own thing in LA. A big no harbor vacancy, full of harder breath of fresh air from this industry. Give it up the punks, the dragons, the heroes, they all came through the scene.
Hello world and all who inhabit it, welcome to episode 17 of Hooligans Unite. My name is Ruby, and a very, very happy Thanksgiving to those of you who are celebrating it today. I hope you and your families are happy, healthy, and are full of food today. We are still doing the Hooligans Help Action Against Hunger fundraiser for the month of November for one more week, you guys, one more week, because there are those out there who are not as fortunate as some of us who are able to have Thanksgiving dinners tonight. So please, please click on the link below and donate today so that we can make sure that we help anyone and everyone who is hungry today and for the days to come. We're at almost $1,000 for the fundraiser, but I know that we can hit our $2,000 goal, and you get a chance to win some amazing prizes. As always, t-shirt, 8x10, painting of the month, which will be debuted next week when we announce the winner. But the most exciting prize that I think we have right now is we have hoodies now, you guys. Hoodies. Hooligans Unite hoodies. So whoever wins this fundraiser will automatically be getting this hoodie along with the choice of their prizes. If they donate $100 or more, they get the hoodie, the t-shirt, the 8x10, the painting, all of it. So please have a wonderful rest of your Thanksgiving. Make sure you donate to Action Against Hunger, and I will see you guys next week. Hello, all of you fans of the 90s. Much simpler times. Lots of hair gel, butterfly clips. Hanson was a thing. Today we're going to be going over a few things that have kind of fascinated me over the last few years, and they are 90s cartoons conspiracy theories. Now, a lot of these have had a tendency to get a little dark, and I kind of steered away from those because, you know, anybody can make anything really messed up if they want to. And we're going to be going through them today and see if you knew some of these and how you feel about them. And if there's any others that you know about that aren't sick and twisted, let me know in the comments below. And let's get started. First, we're going to start off with Courage the Cowardly Dog. Now, I loved Courage the Cowardly Dog. This was one of my favorite shows growing up. Now, if you're not familiar with the program, Courage was a tiny, cute little pink dog that lived with his owners, Eustace and Muriel. And throughout that time, a lot of monsters and scary things came to visit the farm in the middle of nowhere. Now, the theory is that the monsters and the scary things that come to visit the farm are in fact just normal people perceived through Courage's eyes as a normal dog. So what you would see as these normal people coming over, this frightened little dog probably sees as big scary monsters. Also, that nowhere is actually in a normal suburban neighborhood, but because Courage's owners are elderly, that they don't take him out on walks very often, and because dogs lack object permanence, that it seems like it's the only house in the middle of nowhere because it's the only part of the area that he's seen. This is the one, honestly, out of all of them that seems like it could possibly be the most real, or at least an inspiration for the show. Because if you think about it, you know, a small dog that sees, you know, normal sized people coming in could definitely perceive them as monsters. But I'm just gonna let you know that I don't care who you are. I don't remember exactly what it was. I think he was like a mummy or something, but his voice was the most horrifying thing.
Return the slab.
What?
Return the slab, or suffer my curse.
That thing freaked me out as a kid. Ugh. Now, the next conspiracy theory that we're going to be talking about is Scooby-Doo. Now, if you are not familiar with Scooby-Doo, then I'm pretty sure you've been living under a rock for the majority of your life. But if you're too young to know what Scooby-Doo is, or you don't remember what it's basically about a dog named Scooby-Doo and his mystery-solving friends going from place to place, solving mysteries and getting themselves into hijinks. Think I ever thought I would ever really use that word. From the look of the show and definitely of the fashion, the show looks like it takes place sometime in the 1960s or the 1970s. But the theory of the show is that it actually takes place post a horrible economic depression, which is why when all of the characters go to different places, most of the time they are mansions of some sort that have been run down, and most of the time when the villains are unmasked, they are celebrities of some sort that have come upon some kind of hard times.
And I would have made millions if it hadn't been for you meddling kids.
Gives you something to think about, doesn't it? The next conspiracy theory is actually two conspiracy theories in one show, and it actually is one of my favorite shows. We've talked about it a couple times on the channel. It is SpongeBob SquarePants. Now, SpongeBob SquarePants has been a very long-running program. If you are not familiar with it, it is a sponge and a star and a squirrel and a crab and a squid all, you know, cooking at a restaurant and making Krabby Patties, and I don't even know how do you explain this show? Like, how do you really truly explain this show? You just watch the show if you want, or if you don't, whatever. Now, this is a rather popular theory, but the show actually takes place in a city called Bikini Bottom. Now, the theory is that Bikini Bottom is actually a place called Bikini Atoll. Now, in real life, Bikini Atoll is said to have done some nuclear arms testing and some radiation testing in the late 40s and the early 50s. Now, the theory states that because of that, that our characters that we've come to know and love, a talking sponge and a talking starfish and a squirrel that can live underwater, are all products of radiation poisoning.
Look! Another rubber stopper for my rubber stopper collection!
That is so messed up. That is so messed up. And to support that theory, the show was actually created by a former marine biologist. That is something I did not know, which makes it all the more terrifying. The second theory to go along with SpongeBob SquarePants is, in fact, that all of the characters represent one of the 7 deadly sins. Now, most of these I can kind of make a little bit of sense out of. Mr. Crab is definitely greed, Squidward being wrath, Gary being gluttony, Sandy being pride, Patrick being sloth, Plankton being green with envy. The 7th one, though, I don't know that I necessarily agree with. It says SpongeBob is lust. I don't know that I've ever, at least in the early parts of the cartoon, remember SpongeBob necessarily being lustful, unless it's for, you know, Krabby Patties or whatever. But that is the theory as it stands. Let me know what you guys think about it. The next theory actually involves 2 separate cartoons from the 90s and early 2000s. It is Professor Utonium from the Powerpuff Girls and Samurai Jack being the same person. Now, the Powerpuff Girls was one of my favorite shows. I love the Powerpuff Girls, particularly Buttercup, if that wasn't so blatantly obvious. The Powerpuff Girls being a show that is about a professor who wanted to create the perfect little girl. He added sugar, spice, and everything nice, but accidentally added some chemical X and created the Powerpuff Girls, who are 3 superhero sisters that fight crime and the forces of evil. Dun, 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 dun. Samurai Jack is about a young samurai who is sent to the future by an evil wizard named Aku, and throughout the show he tries to get back to his past to undo the evil doings of the wizard. Now, the theory is more than the fact that Professor Utonium and Samurai Jack do look a lot alike. In the first episode, Jack wanders through a post-apocalyptic city that bears a striking resemblance to the city of Townsville in which the Powerpuff Girls takes place. Now, in that same episode, we get a shot of a half-destroyed billboard advertising dog food. And it states, "The talking dog says," which is in fact the exact same billboard that you see hanging on a few skyscrapers in a couple episodes of the Powerpuff Girls. Now, while the show has the same creator, a lot of these things can be linked or might be complete crap. I have no idea. You decide for yourself. The next conspiracy theory involves Inspector Gadget. Now, I didn't watch a lot of Inspector Gadget as a kid. The theory actually is Penny, a young girl who, after her uncle goes missing, builds a robotic replacement of him and becomes Inspector Gadget. The theory states that the main villain of the show, Dr. Claw, is in fact the original Inspector Gadget. And when he found out he was replaced, he went completely insane and became Dr. Claw. And that's why you never see his face. Also why Penny never comes to any harm, because that is in fact his real niece, and he has a soft spot in his heart for her, even though she straight up just built a robot to replace him.
This is one chance for Uncle Gadget to prove he's a better man than that computer.
I don't know. Seems kind of sketchy to me, Penny. Now, the next theory is about probably one of my all-time favorite Disney movies, Aladdin, and my cartoon crush, if anybody ever knew. Aladdin was such a hunk. If you haven't seen Aladdin, don't know most people in the world who haven't, but if you haven't seen Aladdin, basically the premise is there is a young man who falls in love with a princess who has escaped from her palace, and in order to try and win her heart, he befriends a genie who grants him wishes in order to make himself feel like a prince and look like a prince, to convince her into falling in love with him. Sorry to give away the ending, but she just accepts him for who he is and loves him regardless. Great story, great moral. The theory is, at the beginning of the movie, there is a merchant who is selling an identical version of the lamp that Aladdin comes across. The theory is that merchant is in fact the genie himself. Now, while both are voiced by Robin Williams, rest in peace, there are in fact more similarities to him than maybe you noticed before. Both characters are depicted with blue and a red sash, as well as having some of the same facial hair. But the people that came up with this conspiracy theory actually went a little bit deeper and found that this is the only characters that I believe that both only have 4 fingers, which is crazy how perceptive and aware people are.
Please, please, come closer. Too close, a little too close. There.
The next theory is another one of my favorite shows. It is Pinky and the Brain. The show is essentially about 2 laboratory mice, Pinky and Brain is always coming up with a bunch of different schemes and plots to try and take over the world. And Pinky, even though he's trying to help, bless his sweet little heart, always ends up thwarting those plans and stopping those plans from ever taking place, and just, you know, ruining Brain's day all the time. But they're still friends, you know? It's a beautiful thing. Now, in the opening song, it does say one is a genius, the other one's insane, but it never really specifies which mouse is a genius and which mouse is nuts. In a particular episode, Brain goes on to a game show and ends up losing that game show because Pinky actually had the right answer, and once again, Brain did not listen to him. There's also another episode where Brain actually invents a machine that turns Pinky into a genius, but this actually does not change Pinky's character at all. He's actually pretty much the same, and he also points out that most of the time in Brain's schemes, it's because of his own faults. Either way, I love that show, and I love that little saying. What are we gonna do tonight, Brain?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
They never do. Never have. The world's not ran by mice. And the last conspiracy theory we're going to talk about is going to be one of my favorite TV shows from when I was a kid. I've talked about it before. I made a painting about it. The Rugrats. Now, don't get me wrong. There are 1,000,001 theories that are real messed up that I'm not going to talk about on this channel. It makes me sad. I don't even want to think about it. I don't even want to think about it. For those of you who are maybe too young to know what the Rugrats is, God, that makes me feel old. The Rugrats is essentially a show about a bunch of babies who are all best pals that go on adventures and try and deal with everyday baby life. And they are not understood by their parents, but they are understood by each other. They are also understood by Tommy, one of the main characters, his older cousin Angelica, as well as the neighbor Susie, and later on throughout the show, Tommy gets a younger brother, Dill. Now, like I said, there's a lot of real twisted stories. Kind of freaked me out a little bit, but this one is a little less twisted. Still sad, but a little less twisted. This one won't ruin your childhood. Let's go ahead and put it that way.
The horror! The horror!
Angelica is inherently one of the most disliked characters on the show because she's just mean. Just a mean girl. She's mean to the babies all the time. Now, the theory states that Angelica was in fact adopted, and her foster parents, Drew and Charlotte Pickles, are not the most attentive foster parents in the whole world. Charlotte is consistently on her phone, and Drew is always trying to buy her off in order to not emotionally connect with her. Now, the theory states that she has imagined this group of friends as babies because the only time her foster parents interact with her is to discipline her, and she wants to play that role herself, so she imagines these kids as babies so that she herself can be the disciplinarian. Now, this explains why Angelica is the only one who can understand Tommy, Chucky, Phil, and Lil. Unless, of course, you include Susie, who also understands them. But in the theory, it is stated that she knows Angelica, she feels bad for Angelica for the tough life that she's lived, and that she just plays along with Angelica's vivid imagination and claims to speak to Angelica's imaginary friends. In the theory, it is also stated that the only baby that is an actual baby is Dill, which is why she cannot understand him. Which I always wondered that, by the way, as to why Dill didn't seem that much younger than all the other babies, and like for whatever reason, he was just bumbling and gibberish, and he grossed me out. Like, I get babies drool, but that kid had a problem. Like, his salivary glands something was messed up with that because he was drooling all the time. Just gross. I was a gross kid. Now, the most interesting part, and by far the most heart-wrenching part of this theory, is Cynthia. Now, Cynthia is a doll that Angelica is rarely ever seen without. And whenever Cynthia goes missing or anything happens to her, Angelica freaks out and has a complete meltdown. Now, the theory states that the reason for this is that Cynthia was in fact the name of Angelica's biological mother, and that is the one keepsake that she has left to remind her of her original family, which is in fact the saddest thing, that I've ever heard.
You mean you didn't even know I run away?
So in this theory, Angelica doesn't necessarily seem as bad as we all thought she was way back in the 90s. I hated her, but in this theory, like, I feel bad. Like, my heart goes out to her. I don't think there's any truth to this theory. I'm pretty sure that it's been on the internet where the creators of the Rugrats have kind of answered to this one, because this is probably the most popular one out of all the ones that I've read. And I'm pretty sure they're like, whoever came up with that, wild imagination. This was very interesting to me because I am in fact a 90s baby, and I grew up with a lot of these cartoons, so it's interesting to hear the theories of how some of these things were concocted and how some of these things were thought up and what people think that the real underlying story is. Unfortunately, it's almost always darker than what the actual show really was. Actually, Courage the Cowardly Dog is probably one of the only actual conspiracy theories that makes it less dark, and it was already kind of a dark show. There are other ones that I didn't really get into. There's a Hey Arnold one, an Ed, Edd and Eddy one. There's a bunch of different ones that you can look up. They're fascinating to read. It makes you put dots together that probably should never have been connected. But you know, in my opinion, 90s cartoons will always be the best cartoons of all time. You can argue with me on that if you want, but I really truly loved the cartoons that I grew up with. But if you have any thoughts on any of these, any elaborations, please share in the comments below. If they're twisted and messed up, please don't share them. We have a lot of young viewers on this channel that I'm not trying to scar for life with these horrific things that have come out of these innocent cartoons. Somewhat innocent, maybe. So yeah, so thank you so much for joining me on my channel here today. Please like and subscribe and make sure that you donate to the Hooligans Help Action Against Hunger. So thank you so much again for joining me, and I'll see y'all. See, it's the closing of everything. It's the finish. I'm really bad at just wrapping stuff up. I'll ramble and ramble.
When the house makes